All right, so this is Cassie Evans. She's gonna talk about keep scrolling and other things. So I'm just gonna get out of the way, and here's Cassie.
I don't need a microphone. Okay, cool. Awesome. Hi, folks. This is like the most people I've seen in so long. This is so intimidating, but also wonderful, and everyone seems really smiley, and that's great. This is also the first time that I've been put on like a serious technical talk. Apparently, I'm one of the earlier ones, so this is serious and technical. I usually tend to, which way is better? It's usually kind of more visual. If you're really interested in scrolling animations, you might want to come a little further forward because there's lots of visual demos in this talk. And if you can't see the screen, I've tweeted out from my Twitter account a live cast of the slides, so you can always follow along on your phone if you want to. So, hi, I am Cassie. I am a creative developer. I work at GreenSock and I have a lot of love for animation on the web and SVG and teaching people about animation. So my favorite bit about animating on the web is the fact that people get to interact with your animations. So I got started with animation doing motion graphics in After Effects. And the thing with that is that when you create an animation, when you export it out, it's finalized. That's what it looks like. That's what it will always look like. Whereas when you animate on the web, you can hook into user interactions, so people can engage with your animations, and your animations can change based on different states, which is really, really exciting. So it unlocks a whole world of like playfulness and creativity that you don't have with traditional animation. So you can provide visual feedback, and you can direct people around a page, and you can also surprise people with unexpected details. But I think this is arguably even more important nowadays as we're seeing more and more events and businesses and things moving online, and more people are trying to effectively communicate with each other over that medium. And leading into animation and interactivity can help make the experience feel a bit more friendly and a bit more human. But interaction is a two-way street. It's an unspoken agreement between you and the user, and the user or the people interacting with the site. And it's really important to bear this in mind when you're animating. Not all interactions are opt-in. Like, people can choose whether they click to play a video. People who are navigating your site can't choose whether they're going to scroll or not. So there are some interactions that are inherently tied to how someone is going to navigate around your site. And even the world's most beautifully crafted animation is going to be really annoying for someone that's just trying to quickly get an email address or fill out a form. So today we're going to be talking about scroll animations. But before we really dig into how, we're going to take a little look at scroll animations from a UX perspective, so that we can make informed animation choices. Sorry if I'm moving the microphone around. I gesture with my hands a lot, so this is quite difficult for me. So the Nielsen Norman Group have done some really great research on scroll animations, and there was one particular part of their research that stuck out for me. And they user tested a site that had sections that faded in on scroll. And they found that a lot of users couldn't tell the difference between slow loading times and slow animations, entrance animations. So all they noticed was a delay in the interface's response time. So people don't necessarily distinguish between system delays and delays due to visual effects, and that's something to bear in mind when you're animating. So UX takeaway number 1, do not distract from salient information. TLDR, not everything needs to animate on scroll. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I've been guilty of this. It's very exciting when you learn how to animate for the first time and you just want everything to whiz in. But text is the primary means of communicating a message on a website. And you shouldn't put unnecessary obstacles in the way of someone reading that. So focus on animating supporting or supplementary content. The Netlify website does this really well. So the text is visible as you scroll down immediately, and they just animate in graphics, supplementary content next to it. So if you're just scanning the text, you can still read it as you're going down the page. UX tip number 2, animate with intent. So read the room, know your audience and the purpose of your site. So task-based users don't want to be wowed by jazzy animations. They don't want unexpected details. They just want to pay a bill or submit a form. But intentional, well-thought animations directed at the type of people who use your site can be a really useful design tool. So we can use animation to help orient the user and give additional context. So this is a really nice example from the Aga Ion Design site that's got a nav that swaps out to give additional sharing links while the person's reading. And then there's a little progress bar that animates along the top. And it's just a simple little animation touch, but it kind of gives people a little bit more additional context. And prompts them to share. So we can also use scroll-triggered animations to provide focus and grab attention. So I recently worked on this site, which is quite, well, I don't know, well-timed is not the word, but it's aiming to find a solution to New Orleans storm management issues. Then they've recently had all the hurricanes and all the flooding, so it's kind of even more important now with the current flooding crisis. But this is just a site with some information about drains. Like, it's very important information, but it is just some information about drains. And it's important that people read this, but most people are going to get bored with a long list of information about drains quite quickly. So we were trying to figure out how to get people to read all the way through right to the bottom and actually take some action on it. And we added in this really pretty illustrative accent to try and get people to continue down the page. So yeah, I think this is a real issue nowadays, not just with information about drains, which is definitely boring, but just with general information. Like, attention spans are dropping. We're really used to short form content on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok if you follow Chris. And we're not used to reading long form content. I know I sit down to read books sometimes and I just can't do it because my brain's broken. So animation is really good when you're trying to tell a story online and you're trying to keep users engaged. And the linear nature of scrolling is perfect for storytelling because stories are linear. So this article on HuffPost, this was so good. It's about the unstable financial future of millennials. And it was a really, really long and frankly incredibly depressing read. But it's probably the best bit of interactive storytelling I've ever seen because it's full of cute pixel art that kind of offsets the relentless nihilism. So I recommend you read it. It might make you cry, but it's very beautiful. And I love a good bit of UX advice, as shown by the beginning of the talk, but I also really like breaking the rules when it's appropriate. So for scrollytelling and portfolio sites, they're really prime places to throw caution to the wind. You can just show off your skills. So I really like these scroll-triggered masks. It kind of makes the website feel a bit gamified, like you have to scroll to uncover information that's hidden. So this is fun and all, looking at all the demos. If you can see, if you can't see at the back, I apologize, but you can look at the slides later. But how do we achieve something like this? So first up, it would be remiss not to mention the upcoming CSS Scroll-linked animations spec. That's super exciting stuff. And when this finally lands in browsers, I'm doing that thing that conference speakers do where they're like, look at this shiny thing, but you can't use it yet. But when it finally lands in browsers, it's going to be really great for scroll-linked animations. So you define your keyframes just like usual, and your animation. So right now, the lines that are darker, that would just be a normal CSS animation. It would just play on load. And then you create the scroll timeline like this. So you specify the source container to be scrolled. It defaults to the body, but you can specify a different container. The orientation of the scroll, it can be vertical or horizontal, and then the scroll offsets. So that's how much of the scroller you want the animation to play within. This would be the whole distance of the scroller. And then the last step is to link the animation to the scroller. And then we have a scroll-linked CSS scroll bar, which is super cool. Hooray! So if you're interested in checking this out a little bit more, Bramus Van Dam's been making some really cool demos, so definitely give him a follow. He kind of recreated the Firewatch header, but just with CSS. But yeah, unfortunately, as I said, it's like mega experimental, super experimental. So you could only see those demos because I've got experimental web features enabled. So if you enable the flag, you can play around with it. But yeah, you can't really put it on a production site right now. So how else can we do scroll animations? So in JavaScript land, we have the intersection observer API. Strength is in the name. It's good for knowing when something is intersecting, when something is in the viewport. So I find it a little bit hard to remember the syntax and what it all means. I find myself looking it up every time I need to use it, until I found this demo from Michelle Barker, and it is the best demo of intersection observer. So you can change the root margin, just kind of the space around the intersecting container, and then you can change the threshold, and the threshold is how much of the element you want to be in the viewport before it's considered in view. So you can tweak these values and kind of get an idea of it visually, which always helps when you're doing kind of visual front-end stuff. So what if we want a bit more control than intersection observer, though? So this is where ScrollTrigger comes in. ScrollTrigger's a little optional addition for the main GreenSock library, and it gives you a huge amount of control over scroll animations. And I mean, if you're doing complicated animations, you're probably using GreenSock already, so it's kind of a logical addition. If you haven't used GreenSock before, it's a super powerful JavaScript animation library, and it allows you to animate everything. So DOM elements and SVG and 3JS and Canvas, just anything with a number you can animate. Just laughing. So I've been a huge advocate for a while. I've run workshops and done talks, and I always used to preface all my talks with, they're not paying me to say this, I just really like the library, and now I work there. So you can't believe a word I say anymore, but we're going to have a look at some examples, and then hopefully the examples will speak for themselves. This is my fake live coding. So right here we have a little GreenSock tween that's rotating this little dog around. And that's great if the dog is in view at the top of the page, but if we were to set the height of the page to like 300 viewport height, then we wouldn't see the animation before we scroll down. This is why we need scroll-linked animations. So we're going to register the plugin, and then I'm really slow at typing. Then we're going to add a scroll trigger, and we're just going to say, hey, scroll trigger, we want the scroll trigger to find the dog. That's the target. And then when it gets into view, it's going to run that animation. So we've just added that to a tween. And a tween is like the heartbeat of the GreenSock engine. It's like kind of a very performant property manipulator. But we can pass in more details as well. So we can pass in an object. This is just doing the same thing as before. We're saying the trigger is the dog. We can also set markers to be true. So you can see up at the top here and the bottom, we've got a start and end point for the triggers, and a start and end point for the thing that we're animating. So the default will be start when the top of the element hits the bottom of the viewport, but we can change that. We can say start when the center of the element hits the center of the viewport. We can also add an end position. So we're going to say, what are we going to say? I don't know. Start when the top hits, end when the top hits 10% of the way down from the top of the viewport. And you can also use pixel units, or you can put a function in here and calculate something based on the window height if you want. So the end is a little bit pointless right now because the animation is lasting 0.5 seconds, which is the default. So it's just playing. But if we add scrub true, it will link the animation to the scroll progress. So you can see that the rotation is now linked to the scroll progress. I don't know what I'm doing next. I think we're just playing it again, just in case you didn't get it the first time. So it's linked to the scroll progress. Come on, Cassie. Oh, we can also do pinning. So we're going to pin this little dog in the middle of the screen now. So we're going to pin it when the start point hits. And then it will play through the animation, but it will pin it in place. And you can specify whether you want padding to be added afterwards or not. So whether you want the following elements to follow on immediately or be spaced further down the page. And then you can also change the scrub value. So scrub true will link directly to the scroll progress, but you can change scrub to like 1 or 2, and then it creates a bit of easing with the scroll. So it takes like 2 seconds to catch up to the scroll progress. And this usually feels like a lot more natural and less kind of tied in. Timelines. So we've just got a tween at the moment, but the cool thing about GreenSock is you can create sequenced animations on a timeline. So if we were to do that, we just add the scroll trigger to the timeline instead of the tween, and then we can add more tweens to that timeline so we can have sequenced animations, like really long, complex strings of animation. Right now, we're just going to rotate the dog, and then we're going to scale it up, so not super complex. But we have a timeline animation now. Come on, Cassie, scroll. Hooray. Awesome. So that's like a little run through of ScrollTrigger, the basics. Another strength of ScrollTrigger is that it's got a really solid callback system. So you can see these events firing here. We've got a bunch of callbacks on enter, on leave, on enter back, and on leave back. And it's just changing the text when we hit those points. But you could do whatever you want in those functions. And this is a tween as well. So we're just going to add some animation to this. We're going to rotate it. I like rotating things, nice and simple. And then here you can see we've got toggle actions, and this is the action that we want the animation to take when it hits those toggle points. So we're going to play on enter, pause it on leave, resume it on enter back, and then reverse it on leave back. So you can use all of these keywords to kind of specify how you want your animation to play at different toggle points, which is really, really useful. This is my favorite bit. So another thing I really love is scroll animations can get really complex with different screen sizes. And ScrollTrigger has this match media. Wait, spoilers! Has a match media function. So you can segregate your timelines. You can have timelines for smaller screen sizes and larger screen sizes, and then it kills them when that doesn't apply. Let's look at it again. But because it's just looking at match media, we can pass in media features as well as media queries. So we can set custom scroll trigger timelines for people who have vestibular disorders and need reduced animation. So we're just setting operating system level, reduce motion setting, and then you'll see it just fades instead of animates. This is because people with vestibular disorders, it's usually large parallax motions that affect them, and opacity fades are usually fine. So if you really do want to add like a little bit of animation, you can do it that way. So cool. Oh, I just made this demo for fun. So yeah, you can tap into velocity, like the internals of the ScrollTrigger engine, if you want to, and you can use them to create kind of jazzy effects. So this one's listening to the velocity and the direction of the scroll, and then using that velocity to skew some images. I spent most of the talk prep time making this, so we're gonna watch it for like 2 more minutes just to get cool. As always, in every single talk I do, there's one demo which is really shiny, and it's because I don't want to do the talk prep. So that's the one. So even with jazzy effects like that, ScrollTrigger works with the browser's native scrolling behaviors, so it doesn't hijack the user's scroll at all, and it will integrate seamlessly with native scrolling on all devices. Also, mega performant, which is really important when we're doing scroll animations, because scroll events fire loads. It's like mouse events, scroll events. It's a bit of a nightmare if you overuse them. Turn your laptop into a cozy hot water bottle, or other people's laptops into a cozy hot water bottle, which is not good. So ScrollTrigger pre-calculates start and end positions on page load. So it's not constantly checking in on scroll with where bounding boxes are. It pre-calculates it on page load, and then it just checks against those positions. And you can also call ScrollTrigger refresh. So if you're like lazy loading something, you can load that in and then call ScrollTrigger refresh afterwards, and it will calculate the sizes again. So you're not just stuck with on render. So yeah, if you're interested in checking this out or having a play around, I always love to see what people make. So we've got a showcase on CodePen. I've put a little link to it in my slides, which I shared on Twitter. So we've got loads of things that are put together by loads of awesome creative coding folks. And if you make something cool, I'll whack it in there as well. And you can check out the GreenSock docs. You probably go on Twitter, as Chris said, Twitter and like TikTok and everything first. But I promise you the docs are really good. They're like full of videos and code pens and examples, so please read them. And if you get stuck, we have really great forums. I like to say they're like Stack Overflow, but full of like actually nice people. So someone will be able to help you with a smile and possibly emojis. So before I head off, I just want to say one last thing. So scroll animation can be a pretty contentious topic for the web community, because when they're done badly, they're usually done really badly, and they can be horrible for performance and distracting for people with ADHD, and sometimes even nauseating for people with vestibular disorders. But done right, scroll animations can aid in orientation, they can direct attention, they can help express personality and make your website feel more human, and help tell a story. And the thing that all good animation has in common is a sense of purpose. And it's our job as developers to find the right balance between the exciting creative ideas and the technical limitations and the impact that that has on the end users. So think about the purpose and be intentional and use your animation powers responsibly. That's it. Thank you very much. I have stickers.
Do you want questions or not? It's optional.
Yeah, you can ask questions. Questions
All right,
are
if you
good.
have a couple questions, you have time, then we're going to take about a 10-minute break. So
Cool.
ask away.
If the question is, can I have a sticker? The answer is yes.
Yay. Or no questions. It's totally fine.
No
There's
questions
one
is
right
cool
there.
too. Hello. So yeah, he was asking if there's any performance concerns with animating things. So scroll animations, it's especially if you're using ScrollTrigger, the performance implications won't come from ScrollTrigger itself. It will come from the properties that you animate and what you are animating. So there's a few things that are notoriously bad, and that is SVG filters. I've animated loads of SVG filters in CodePens, and it's wonderful, but you probably shouldn't do it in production. Gradients are really bad. Anything that's like a layout property, really. So focus on animating composite properties like transforms and opacity. And if you're doing something like super crazy with loads and loads of elements and like particles and stuff, probably don't do that with DOM elements or Canvas. Do that with like, DOM elements or SVG. Do it with like Canvas or WebGL or something.
There's a great example. If you go to the Apple website and try and pre-order a phone on Firefox right now, it'll give you like an epileptic fit as it's trying to scroll, and the like required fields just start shaking red, and you can't get out of it. And like if you zoom out so the screen is super small, then you can magically press the next button and get out of it. Otherwise, you're just like vibrating to death. So it's pretty crazy. Yeah. So that's an example of like terrible scrolling, even from like one of the world's most respected software companies. So.
Why did they push that? They've got so many developers.
Firefox. They don't care.
Terrible.
I'm the one who used it. So.
Yeah.
I'm kind of finding more and more sites that kind of a bit like go to IKEA, where you go in, have no choice but to go all the way through to find what you want. Do you think it's likely we'll end up with kind of testing or kind of quality analysis tools for these sorts of animations? So if we look at Lighthouse, that gives us all sorts of page load times and things. Do you think it's likely we'll end up with libraries for testing this type of site? Whether it's kind of any good or not, or it's just overkill?
Are you talking about testing like animation performance or? Oh, you're getting into like kind of track it. I don't like tracking. I'm not a fan of that. I think that just test it with real people, and if it makes people smile, then like probably good. But yeah, I mean, you can do like tracking and check when people leave the page and all of that. I don't know. That's like black magic for me. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Cool.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.